your spirituality is as individual as you are.
Yeah.
And it's, because even though, I grew up Bible Belt Christian, and it was a really hateful atmosphere for gay community. Yeah. But the interesting part is I don't deny that. It was important for me growing up.
Yeah, it gives you the foundation of morals, because I was the same way, non-denominational Florida Christian. Shout out. Shout out to Florida Christian in Miami.
But it's also interesting too, is you can, I can't think of the word I'm looking for. You don't have to accept every part of the religion that you grew up in, and because a lot were hurt and rejected by it. But it's, even with my mom, and my family's super religious, and that's been a nice foundation to have in my life. Yeah. But it's, it's great seeing them even have to change their perception of what their faith is to accept who I am. Mm-hmm. And so, if we could all do that with each other, that would be, just, see each other a little bit through their lens and not through ours.
Yeah. As far as just more acceptance and more love, I get it. I mean, mine, very similar story. And, it's my Florida Christian, very, very strict upbringing. And then I've, coming out at 18, I too diagnosed with HIV at 21. It was a hard time, between the family not accepting me, and that's a similar, again, different generations, similar background story, accepting, but through them seeing, and the funny, to lighten the topic, my mom was like, "So you're like Magic Johnson? You're like, okay, so you're gonna live?" Like, that's literally the only comparison that they had. Yeah,
it's minimal for sure.
It's minimal because it's the only social comparison that they had.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, Mom, I'm healthy. I'm totally healthy. It's the stigma. It's the stigma that's, it sadly still does exist.
God, that was hard too.
For you, worse than for me.
Yeah. Growing up, especially growing up, growing up with that stigma, then it's like, it makes it harder to date. Yeah. Harder to meet anybody. And you do get judged, and there is shame behind it, and there is guilt behind it. And, and blame and everything else. There's like every negative emotion that you can feel, you're slapping on yourself and feel like everybody else is slapping it on you.
Yeah. And then now, this generation, I unfortunately was right before PrEP. It was literally, I was diagnosed 3 years before PrEP. 2.5 years before PrEP. And now you have PrEP, and it's not even, it's still, people do have a stigma. They do, but it's such a different world than it was like 11 years ago.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's so crazy because, again, these little things we take for granted. Mm-hmm. And like, I know my generation takes for granted. When we talk and when I hear your stories, how do you say this? I've always been with older men. All my friends are older, but it still shocks me that, the amount of pain that you've endured in your lifetime, and I feel like it's almost been forgotten. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And I can't say that it doesn't, I don't, it's something, fortunately, that I don't think about all the time as I did when I was diagnosed. So I think that's a blessing that I've been able to go, okay, this is just, it's not who I am. It's part of who I am. It's just a part of me. It doesn't define me. Yeah. In the beginning, it totally defined me because it was like, that's,
because back then it was a death sentence.
Yeah, it was a death sentence. And also it was death sentence in any way. Yeah. Because it's sort of like, and that's what made it safe and healthy to move to a different community is just because, South Florida was, I hate to say it, but it was a lot of places where it was a big place where lots of guys came to for their last days. Sad. They came to party away their last days. That's a big part of how the whole circuit in Miami started. They had these crazy parties.
Isn't that ironic?
Yeah, it's a weird way, but in their mind at that time is if I'm going to go, I want to spend my last days blowing it all out. Yeah. And I'm going to do every drug, and I'm going to stay up all night. I'm going to be as unhealthy as I can be in order because if I'm going, I'm going.
That was, we talked about it, and you have to make light of this situation. We're not laughing at exactly, but we talked about, what was it? It was, they did these fundraisers, these HIV fundraisers where men would just spread HIV. And and not intentionally. It's this lack of responsibility because you have nothing to live for. And it's sad because you don't think you should look look at life that way. You think, you'd be more cautious with your last days. And again, things have changed. I think, like I said, my generation it's forgotten about.
Yeah.
It's not talked about anymore. It's like you don't realize why you're circuiting. You don't realize why you're on the float. You don't realize what was fought for.
Yeah. And it's super important right now, especially politically and everything. It's sort of like that, all of those years and those things.
Yes.
It's sort of like, just fighting to get funding for anything. And especially in Tennessee, we had to have our own little fundraisers and start our own little services to have any kinds of resources.
Yeah.
I mean, in Tennessee, you would know guys and they would disappear. Yeah. It wasn't like, oh, I'm moving to somewhere else, and their parents were at such shame and such that if you asked them, they would, they just say he moved, or that and you'd never know the story, and you'd never see them again. Yeah. And it was it was very interesting that way. So I do think that needs to be kept alive, especially for politically right now. Again, coming from Tennessee, being crazy, and Florida just becoming crazy.
Yeah, I got out just in time. Drag queens are legal and all the craziness.
Well, the interesting part is we compartmentalize it that way. Since I've been here and going to Pride events and stuff, they'll go, "Oh, Florida." And I'm like going, you should be very scared and very aware, because it just has to start with one thing.
Yeah.
And you have the governor who's doing all of this stuff, wanting to be president. So it's,
between that and again, it all started with a viral video with Wynwood, our house. Shout out Rocco. I love you, Rocco. But now look at where we are. Drag queens are now illegal in Florida. It's just wild how that, like you said, what can happen, what started it, what, and then also he's running for president. And then didn't he make sign into legislation that if he doesn't win the presidential campaign, he can actually go back right away?
Oh yeah. No, he could maintain his, usually when you start running for president as a governor, you have to remove yourself from office. So he signed legislation that he does not. He can stay governor even through through his presidential campaign. And it's control and it's fear, and we all know that. But it's but everybody should be really aware and really be. This isn't a Florida thing. Yeah. This is an LGBT thing, and again, fighting for rights for all.